Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Tech Your Business podcast. Today on the show, we're talking about one pain business owners have. A lot of us, myself included, we start businesses out of excitement, and over time, we realize that probably that's not really what we want to do, or we outgrow the businesses or other responsibilities, or probably the business is just not working like we wanted it to. And a lot of time we just let it go and shut it down. Years of work gone down the drain. Today, we'll be talking to a business broker, and we'll be talking about building a sellable business with tech, processes, and automation. Because at the end of the day, when you build a business, you should build it so if at any point you don't want to go ahead with it, you should be able to sell it to someone else who can continue from where you stopped. So our guest today is David Jacobs. Welcome to the show, David.
Thanks, Peter. I'm excited to have our conversation today.
Yeah. So can you just tell us a bit about you and what you do?
Sure. So I've been a business broker for coming on 4 years. It's been a third career for me. When I started my career, I worked in Silicon Valley at the large technology companies, Oracle, Siebel Systems, BMC Remedy, and SUSE Linux. And then in my mid-30s, I decided to follow my entrepreneurial passions and took over a print brokerage. We sold printed catalogs throughout North America, very much a manufacturing-oriented business. So we did, kind of trucks full of paper would be converted into catalogs. So it's very manufacturing intensive, and we really provided a lot of value because our customers were spending a significant amount of their marketing dollars on the printing, and their graphic designers were creating their catalogs, but there was really nobody there that understood the ins and outs of how the commercial printing market was set up and it worked. And, the largest companies would hire a print buyer, but our customers, they didn't buy enough to justify a full-time position. So that was the role we played for them, and would really help them find reliable printers. And there's lots of them that would produce their books cost effectively. And then in my mid 40s, I realized with everything was moving online, and we had great customer relationships. But the more I talked to my customers, say, hey, last year you spent $300,000 with me. This year you spent $150,000. What do we do wrong? What can we improve? And the message back was, David, we're still spending $300,000 in marketing. We're just moving more and more to our online store, and just less and less on print. And I realized then, in my mid 40s, that this thing wasn't going to last for another 20 years, and it was time for me to move on. Yeah. So, the business was making some money. I had a lot of employees, many of which had been loyal for many, many years, and I, felt a responsibility not to abandon them. So I thought I would sell the business, and it really opened my eyes to how this whole kind of small business world operates. It's very different than what you see on TV and in the Wall Street Journal and places like that.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing we had is, coming from the software world, everything's based on software, and that's how you fix things. And every problem is a software solution. And I had done the same thing with my printing business, and we had built a software application that really it made a huge difference in our operations. When I took over the business, we were winning like 5% of our quotes, and by the end of my 7 years there, we were winning like 83% of our quotes. So the software was just generating huge value. At one point, I thought about pivoting into a software company, but I realized that the staff I had they knew about printing, but they didn't understand software. So we sold printing, and we used the software tool to do it. And when I started talking to business brokers about my tech-enabled business, which is what I thought I had, the people I spoke to, they just didn't get it. They couldn't even repeat back to me what I described the software was doing. And I thought they're never going to be able to represent me in a way that is positive and creates the right kind of impression with potential buyers, because I felt like there's really a platform here to build on. So I ended up selling the business myself, which oh man, did I stumble. I made so many bad decisions and mistakes, and it took me about 2 years to get a deal done, but I finally did. It was a great deal. Still in communication with the buyer now, and that was done in 2013. So it's been 10 years, and
Wow.
they took on my employees, and they all stayed until they eventually retired. And we had an earnout component. We got paid every penny that we were owed. It was just a great deal. And I guess it goes to prove that there are really good people out there, and you just have to find them.
Definitely.
Yeah. So after I sold my business, I kind of bounced around Silicon Valley again, working at startup after startup. But it's very hard after being a business owner to go back and be an employee. So I knew that wasn't working, and I was approached by a guy named Raj, who had just taken on a new franchise for Link Business, which is one of the 4 large business brokers, and he wanted to talk to me about setting up a tech practice. So after a lot of thought and investigation and research, I decided to join Raj. And in California, you need to be licensed. So it took me until August of 2019 to get my license. And, here I am. It's been 4 years. It's been a great I call it my third career. And, it's a chance to make some money. And also you get involved with people, and you get to know them and learn about, their struggles and triumphs as they built up their business. And then you finish the deal and you move on. So it's all the great part of getting to know people without the staleness that can come from ongoing relationships where things are struggling to work. So it's just been a great change for me.
That's really true. So I'm very curious. This software you built for the print brokerage, what did the software do?
So it did. I guess selling printing is a commodity business, and we went back through, and we had great relationships with our customers. I mean, even when we sent in a quote, if we would lose it, we would always be able to get them back on the phone or email and say, hey, we sent you this quote. You didn't choose to print with us. What happened? And we determined that in the printing business, 5% is kind of the loyalty factor. So, if you quote $105 or $105,000 for a print job, and somebody comes in at 100,000, you might get the job if they like you and they trust you. But if somebody comes in at 99,000, you're going to lose, because everybody, it's a marketing expense. These are small family-owned businesses, and anything much beyond a 5% difference in price is really where the the loyalty stops, and the dollars and cents comes into the decision process. So what I felt was I really had to be able to nail down the price, that when I sent a price quote to a customer or a prospect, I had to know that, my price was competitive with the market. And the interesting thing about the printing market, like many other of these loosely, highly fragmented markets, is there's no central database of what a print job should cost. It's, the prices are all over. The vendors have completely different cost structures. Everybody's doing cost plus. And coming from a more theoretical, if I had access to a market price, I would really have an advantage. So that was the main thing that we tried to accomplish. And I think we did it pretty well. There was one other company that had kind of what we had in terms of this market price. And they managed to go public in Chicago. Trying to remember the name of their company. They had approached us to buy us, which is where I got the idea that, I could sell this business rather than just walk away from it. So we had a market price. We would know that, when our price quote went out, and then there was all the detail of how do you get the market price. And what I learned is the equipment in the printing business is it's highly specialized. So, even a seemingly small change in the design of the book can really change the kind of equipment that you need to manufacture the book on to be cost competitive. So what we were able to do is you could take the specs that like a graphic designer would know, the dimensions of the book, the number of pages, the type of paper, you would put it into our system, and then the system would find out who had all of that equipment in-house, and who was also discounting. Because one of the things that printers do it's such a cyclical business, is that when the plant is busy, they don't discount. When the plant has empty production hours, they discount to fill the plant and keep the machines running. So we track that discounting, and we would find out who had the equipment and then who was discounting, and inevitably those would be the competitive prices. And it's nothing that you couldn't do manually, but it would just require an enormous staff of people, and you couldn't be cost effective if you had to pay people a salary to do all these calculations. So that's what the software did. And then the other piece was, it was just a workflow, because as you can imagine, there's lots of back and forth and tracking all these documents, and you're waiting on quotes and you're comparing quotes, and we tracked all of that. So that's what it did. It found the best prices and the reliable printers, and then it just kept track of all the paperwork so that we could work as a team. Because one of the things I always felt was, in terms of customer service, when you call a business, somebody should answer the phone, and they should be able to answer your question, not take a message. So that's what we did.
Actually, so that's so basically just saved you a whole lot of time researching, a whole lot of time making calls and all that. So that makes
Right.
a
And
whole lot
we
of
worked a little
sense.
different. We weren't brokers. We actually had contracts in place with our vendors, so they knew exactly what we were doing and how we were doing it. And we tried to be good partners to them too. When we would get a quote, we would always provide feedback. Here's your quote. These are the other quotes we got on the same job. This is how your pricing stacked up. We've won the job, but awarded it to another printer. We lost a job to another broker. It was completely transparent, because we wanted to make our vendors better too. And at one point we even got into the paper market, because the vendors, these printing jobs, 70% of the cost structure is on paper. And we thought we could use our same kind of methodology and software to get into the paper market. And, we saved a number of our vendors millions of dollars a year on buying paper, because we would get alerted, I have 3 train cars full of paper stuck at a yard in New Jersey. Do you know anybody that needs 60-pound number 3? And I'm like, I got a guy. In fact, I have a large job going to press in New Jersey. Let me see if he wants to buy some cheap paper to run it on and make a little extra money. And, frequently they would say, oh, we don't get into paper buying, David. And then 3 days later, I'd get a thank you call from the vendor where they had bought the paper. I'm like, okay, now we understand how this works behind the scenes. So we tried to be good members of the industry too during our time in there.
All right. So what, from your experience, makes a typical business unsellable?
So most businesses exist to provide income to the owners, and if there's no income being generated, it's going to be virtually impossible to sell the business. Yeah, and even with technology companies, and you see these stuff in the tech media. I'm in Silicon Valley. The stuff is all over the place out here. It's very rare for an unprofitable business to be sold. And when you see it in the paper, that's because it's so rare. For every time you see, some company sold for 100 times revenue or some outrageous valuation like that, you're only getting half the story. They might have just sold their user base, and they had hundreds of millions of users that they sold for 50 cents each. But when they write up the article, they put it on the revenue. There's some part of the story you don't know. And there's thousands and thousands of businesses that are just unprofitable, unable to get any kind of scalable revenue, that just get shut down, and you don't hear about that. So there's a huge kind of bias in the media that I think creates unrealistic expectations on the part of business owners. You really need to figure out, how can I attract customers and get them to sign or pay, where it's repeatable and scalable, and I can sell to strangers, not just my friends. And then how can I deliver that service at a profit?
Repeatable and scalable. So how do you ensure that your delivery, your product delivery, your service delivery is that repeatable and scalable?
Yeah, well, I think, beyond making money, which is what will attract buyers to any business opportunity, the way you make a saleable business is the way that you build a high quality company. And that's just to, understand and document your procedures. There should be no single person that's so important to the business that it couldn't continue without them. So everything should be documented. People should have a general understanding of what their coworkers do, so they could step in if somebody, has to take the day off of work or leave early. It shouldn't stop the whole process. And I think that's just generally good management. So even if you don't want to sell, just to document, and by documenting, I mean understand and write down what you do and how you do it, is a really important step. And if you ever do decide to go to market, that's what the buyers are going to want to look for. They want to see financial statements. You're going to need good records. And then after that is, how do you do what you do? And don't talk me through it. Show me something written down so that I can understand it quickly.
All right. So for founders who may want to sell their business probably in the future, what are the most important things that they should focus on right now?
It depends on the stage of the business. Businesses kind of go through a transition as they grow. I guess the most important first step is to you need well-organized financials, because that's the key to everything. And buyers are going to look at your tax returns. So, if you're in a cash, like a retail type business with a lot of cash, when you walk by the cash register and you put the $300 in your pocket, that's great. And you may not end up paying taxes on that money, but you won't be able to count it when you go to sell the business either. That money has disappeared. So, keeping accurate financial records. And one of the things we find is that, most people are honest and they have an accountant helping them on the tax return. But a common problem that people have as their business begins to grow is they bring in bookkeepers and people like that to help just record the transactions, and expenses get miscategorized. So while the net income is accurate and the net income is the net income, it might have been travel to visit a customer, but it got recorded as a marketing expense. And what this does, as the business begins to grow, is that it makes it very difficult for potential buyers to understand how to model the business. And modeling of the business is going to determine what they're willing to pay. So if they don't really know what your cost of customer acquisition, because you have travel expenses mixed in with marketing, it's very hard to know how fast they could grow the business with an injection of capital. So I would say, the number one thing is just going to be to keep accurate financial records, and to make sure as you bring on people to help with bookkeeping, that they can easily understand how to categorize the expenses correctly. And then after that, once you kind of know what you're doing and you know how to deliver the service, people usually get to a few $1 million in revenue through the charisma and tenaciousness of the founder, and then they get stuck again. And usually that's because they really don't have a well-defined marketing process in place. Because to grow any business, you're going to have to be able to attract the attention of strangers and convince them that your product is worth buying, and get them to sign a contract. And that seems to be where people get stuck at the next stage, is how to create a repeatable marketing program.
Nice. All right. So talking about technology, what tech tools, popular or maybe unpopular tech tools, do you recommend that founders can implement early in their businesses? Because you talked about documentation, keeping of records, financial and all other records. So what tech tools do you recommend that they can implement to make this easy for them to do?
Yeah, so most people use QuickBooks for their accounting. It's very common, and it works fine. And some buyers will even just ask, like, send me the QuickBook data file, because they just know how to analyze it very quickly, because they look at so many businesses. A tool like DocuSign, so that you can keep electronic copies of all your contracts rather than having to go back through paper files or have them scattered around, servers, can help. A good CRM tool, there's lots out there, but, kind of being able to manage and document, who are your customers, who are your prospects, how long does it take to turn a prospect into a customer, what does the deal funnel look like? All these types of things will come out of a CRM tool. Yeah, and then just a payroll service, so that you have, what your employees actually cost you with both salary and benefits. I would say those are the top 3 or 4 tools that will help keep you organized.
Nice. So CRM, the bookkeeping, that's QuickBooks, and the rest. So, yeah. So when okay, you talked about building software for the print brokerage business. And for other businesses that might not be tech-enabled, they might have a lot of processes, they might have a lot of workflows that would benefit from that automation you carried out on that business. But when you look at it, it takes time away from running the business. It takes resources away from running the business. So how much time and budget do you think founders should allot to doing these things that are not bringing out immediate revenue, but that's in the future would optimize the business and make it more sellable?
It's hard to give I think it depends where the business is in its evolution and where the founder is kind of in their career and their time frame. You know, if you're running a business and you're making good money, you're happy with it, and you're in the middle of your career and you don't want to sell because you enjoy what you're doing, then business as usual. You keep running your business and doing what you're doing and keep making a good living. If you're kind of coming on toward the end of your career and you think you might want to sell your business, then it might make sense to spend more of your time kind of building the company rather than working within the company. And by that, I mean, getting things documented. If there's critical processes that could be improved through software and automation, then devoting the time or hiring somebody to learn your business, document it, and then get the software built. And it doesn't have to be, this huge 0 to 100 software development process. Once your business processes are documented, you can look and say, okay, this is the critical thing that my staff of 10 people repeat. Each of them does it 20 times a day. So what is that? 200 times a day, this process gets repeated. If we could save just a couple of minutes, it would free up hours and we could talk to more customers and prospects. So I would look at it like that. And, you try to automate the big time consuming pieces of your business, like we did with soliciting quotations and comparing the numbers out. I mean, I had a staff of 35, everybody who talked to customers and all the back office. This is all we did. It was hours and hours of everybody's time every day. So, if we can automate that, that's going to free up people to talk to more customers. And that's how I would approach it. And then I would say kind of the final thing is, if you have a profitable but boring kind of business, and you're like, I'm approaching retirement age, nobody young is going to be interested in this business. If you could develop some software, that might bring in a whole new crop of younger people that would be interested in running a tech-enabled business. Your business based on paper or emails is probably not attractive to somebody young like that. But if there's a software application where they say, oh, I can, expand to another city, or maybe license the software with a little more development work, you could really increase the pool of potential buyers for your business.
All right. So apart from
there's lots of what appear to be like, there was a guy out here who had a dry cleaning business. And you would think, like, who would want to have a dry cleaner and operate all those stores, all those chemicals? And this guy had a great idea. He would put lockers in the apartment buildings with the young workers who, young single guys who needed their dress shirts pressed every day for work, but they certainly weren't going to iron and do their own laundry. And his idea was just to put like an Amazon kind of locker in each of these apartment buildings. And he turned what was a dry cleaner into a tech-enabled business. And when he sold it, sold like a tech-enabled business. It wasn't valued like a dry cleaner. So it was very innovative. And I just think there's lots of businesses out there that appear boring at the outset, but with a little thought and creativity, you could really turn them into something very exciting that would attract, a very large pool of potential buyers.
I was about to ask you for an example or two, and that dry cleaning example really, I'm sure it's really get people's thoughts
Yeah.
in motion.
I mean, like my business with the print broking, we had there were no assets, right? It was our relationships with the printers and our relationships with the customer. And, usually what happens when you sell these kind of businesses, you join somebody else for a year and they pay you, and then you walk away and they take over your employees and they take over your accounts and you're left with nothing. And by creating the software, we created an asset that could be sold. So we were able to, actually sell a business rather than walk away. And I think there's lots of relationship type businesses, or, kind of these regional service oriented businesses with a little bit of software and creativity. You could create an asset that could be sold rather than just a group of people that you have to walk away from.
Interesting. So when you look at when we talk of devaluation, one problem people encounter selling their businesses, I think you mentioned it before, while with the print brokerage, is what they can sell for, what they can sell the business for. Yeah.
I think you're in the UK. I'm here in the US. We have a big website called Biz Buy Sell, and for traditional Main Street businesses, which are stores and retail type locations, Biz Buy Sell is just an enormous resource, and you can go on there and see what other businesses sell for in your industry. So if you own a bar, or you own auto repair, or a landscaping service, go on to Biz Buy Sell and see what kind of other companies about your size in your industry, what the asking price is. And I think that's a great starting point. The multiples for a service business are usually between 3 and 5 times the SDE. So SDE is kind of the net income of the business plus the owner's salary, plus any other personal expenses and some financial things that are added back. You can Google the term seller's discretionary earnings and see how to calculate it. But just to set expectations, it's usually between 3 and 5 times. The better businesses, meaning, the larger ones, are the ones that are growing faster, go more for 5. The smaller ones are the ones that aren't growing, go around 3. You might be able to get a little premium, but you can't get a lot.
Interesting. So let's talk about, let's say someone wants to sell their business. Probably they've implemented tech or whatever in it, or they've done the other things right, and they have a business that is ready to sell. What kind of process are they looking to go through?
So I would say, let's say that you're thinking about selling your business and you have an idea to tech enable it. You can talk about what the software does, but until those numbers show themselves in the tax returns, you just have a story. The buyers are going to look at the tax returns. So I would, advise people, if you think you're going to sell 3 to 5 years out and you think you might want to develop some software to try to scale the business, it's time to start building that and getting it deployed now, because you want to be able to point to the results. And the results don't have to be dramatic, right? You could have been growing at 10%, and now you're growing at 20%. And that's, you've just doubled the growth rate with some software. So that would certainly help with your valuation. And once these results show up in the tax returns, a broker or M&A advisor, somebody like myself, there's lots of us out there, would do a valuation, and that's really just to agree on a starting point. So, I think my business is worth $6 million or $8 million. If the broker agrees, that's good. Doesn't mean you're only going to sell it for $6 million. You might find somebody that wants to pay 7.5. But once you agree on the valuation, that's the hardest part. And then you need to get the business documented and written up in a marketing packet, which the industry calls a CIM, which is a confidential information memorandum. And all brokers do this differently. So you can ask for copies of previous ones just to make sure that, they understand your business and your industry, and they write it up the way you like it. And I would say all of that kind of getting ready and going to market takes 6 to 8 weeks in general. And usually a lot of it is just waiting for information coming from the client. And then, I write stuff up, and then it has to be edited, and then I send it back to my client for their feedback. And it's a back and forth collaborative process. But once it's ready to go, it goes off to the graphic designer and gets laid out. It looks really nice. in a PDF, and then we're ready to go to market. And then I would say it takes probably 8 weeks to start meeting buyers. And some of it is, there's time. These markets aren't really liquid. It's not like a house where everybody needs a house. Not everybody has to buy a business. So, and then you want to wait for Google to index the listing. So, it can take Google a month. So it takes about 2 months once you go to market. So, now you're 3.5 to 4.5 months into this process, and you'll start meeting the buyers. And I usually tell my clients that you're going to meet the buyer very early, but you might not know it later in the process. So, generally it's 6 to 9 months to get a deal done. Sometimes it can happen very fast. The type of client that I really like is somebody who's been through this process multiple times, where they received a cold call and somebody was interested in buying their business, and they went down that path and they furnished documentation, and lo and behold, the business didn't sell to that buyer, which we can talk about at length why that happens, and I have a blog post on that. But those sellers are usually fairly organized and ready to go. And I worked with one of those, and we found a buyer in 2 weeks, and the deal was done 30 days later. So 6 weeks, start to finish, done.
Well,
Other times it takes longer, and it takes 9 to 12 months. And how organized is everybody and ready to go when you're dealing with corporate buyers and private equity funds, because they're in the business of buying businesses. They usually are ready to go very fast. They already know who their attorney is. They already have what they need. They know how to do the analysis very quickly. Family offices are also a good potential buyer, depending on the dynamics of the business, and they can move not quite as fast, but certainly faster than a high net worth buyer. And the slowest, of course, is somebody needing an SBA, just an operator needing an SBA loan, because the SBA process can inject another 30 to 60 days of waiting for that loan to be approved. So I guess the short answer to your question is a business can be sold in 6 to 9 months, sometimes faster, sometimes longer, but that's how long it takes.
Okay. All right. So another thing I want to mention is a lot of us, after working in our businesses for years, we develop these sentimental attachments to the business. And like you said, you had your staff who you didn't want to just let go like that. So how do you find, or what can you do to make sure that your business ends up with the right buyer that would continue with your vision, treat your team properly, and and let you know your business is in good hands?
I would say that it's I'm just kind of going through some of the businesses that I've sold. It's rare for the sellers to pick the highest offer. And the high, you can have very high valuations, and there's also deal terms. So it's very rare where let's say the valuation is $6 million, where somebody's going to hand you a check for $6 million at closing, and you hand them the keys and you walk away, and that's the end of that, right? There's seller notes, there's earnouts, there's cash at closing, there's all kinds of structures. So it's rare for somebody to do the highest valuation. And I would say that in the end, this is a transaction between people. And you're going to meet all kinds of buyers, and they're going to have all different kinds of personalities and skill levels and values. And you really need to pick the right match. And that's really up for the seller to decide. So, one of my concerns when I sold my business, which wasn't a problem because the industry knowledge was so specialized, was I wanted to make sure that my key employees that had been with me for so many years were given a chance, right? I didn't want to sell the business and have them get laid off. So part of our deal was that they had to be given 12 months of guaranteed employment. And I figured that was 12 months is enough time for my employees to get to know the new owner, and the new owner to get to know the employees, and they can sort themselves out after that. And that's very common, especially for kind of lifestyle businesses where somebody started the business, maybe in their 20s or 30s. They've been doing it for 30 years. The employees have been there for 20 or 30 years. They know each other. It's not quite family, but almost. I think that most business owners care about their employees because they realize the reason that they were successful is because these people help them. and they kind of went through the process together. And usually there's some kind of a retention, or if they decide to cut the staff gets a year's salary or something like that, and that can all be negotiated into the agreement. These are custom transactions. In the larger ones, which is really what I focus on, the lower middle market, there's always attorneys involved. So, if you care about your employees, or maybe there's certain customers that have to be treated a certain way, or vendors that are dependent on you that, you have a relationship with, all of this can be negotiated between the buyer and seller and included in the transaction.
All right. So when you talk about lower middle market, what does that mean?
So here in California, what I do is fairly well regulated, and I can work on, with my license, I can work on transactions up to $30 million. Beyond $30 million, you need a securities license. So you need to be an investment banker, not a business broker or M&A advisor, like I am. And within the business broker, M&A advisor world, there's really two sub-markets. There's the Main Street, which is what most people think of with business brokers. And these are, mostly retail, restaurants, bars, auto repair, dry cleaners, heating and air conditioning repair, small distributors, things like that. And then there's the lower middle market. Generally companies that would sell for between $5 and $30 million. And the reason why that they're really split is because an SBA loan can be at maximum $5 million. So there's a fair amount of liquidity going after Main Street businesses, which is what most individual people would buy for themselves. Buying yourself a job is a term that's used. In the lower middle market, it's harder to find a buyer because you're too small to attract most of the private equity or family offices, and you're too big to get an SBA loan. So unless you're willing to lend the buyer through a seller note a large amount of money, it's very hard to get a deal done. And I like these larger transactions. They're more financial in nature than emotional, like a Main Street business. And I think that because of the lack of liquidity, being a broker in that market, I can add a lot more value.
So that's like $5 to $30 million range. Yeah. All right. So going back to tech, what's your favorite tech tool that you can't go a day without running your brokerage business?
Well, I've tried to be low tech as I do this because I don't want to get lost in the details of tech and really focus in on my clients and the buyers. But I live in email.
Wow.
If somebody emails me and you don't hear from me in 24 hours, I didn't get your email because I'm on top of it. See, I use a CRM just to keep track of my conversations, and I keep track of past buyers. So every buyer, signs an NDA. I use DocuSign. It's just easy, and everybody seems to know how to use it because it's kind of the standard. But there's other good tools out there too. And then I use a CRM just to keep this track of the paperwork. And I tend to kind of, once I get one client in a market, like I've had a number of software companies that are in the e-commerce space. So they have tools like shopping carts and integrations with Shopify. They seem to run in like subsectors. So it's helpful, if I'm involved in the Shopify ecosystem to say, oh, you looked at this other company I had for sale. Here, I got another slightly different approach to working with Shopify. You want to take a look at this software company. So it just kind of tracks all of that kind of sector stuff and lets me go right back to buyers that I've already talked to and, have a good feeling towards. It's the screening and filtering out the buyers is really the most time consuming part of this. And, it's why one of the main reasons it took me so long to sell my business is because I didn't really know what I was doing. And it's what I spend most of my time doing now, even though I've been doing this for 4 years now. It's just, you talk to the buyers, and there's so much about buying a business with no money down. And there's all these crazy scams that seem to be going on where people want, they want to look at the tax returns, and they appear to be a legitimate buyer, but you realize, like, I don't know if they're trying to grab social security numbers or EINs or what they're trying to get. but you really only know until you talk to people, and you have to talk to a lot of them to kind of begin to understand the patterns and what this stuff looks like. So keeping track of these buyers, especially the ones that have kind of passed through my filter and have a gold star and are worth working with on potential deals, is where my time goes, and the CRM keeps track of that for me.
All right. So if you could go back in time and tell your younger self one thing about building a business to sell, what would that thing be?
When I started running the business, I didn't think I would sell it. I didn't know it could be sold. If the business is making money, it can be sold, but knowing who would buy it and what they're looking for, I think, it's always, I'm a fairly goal-oriented person. It's always great knowing what the goal is and working towards the goal, rather than kind of trying to be everything to everybody. So the different types of buyers, and in the lower middle market, there's large public corporations, there's private equity, and there's family offices. There's also high net worth individuals. Kind of understanding the dynamics of the different types of buyers and what they look for and how they run their businesses after they acquire them. If you know this information, you can kind of narrow in. And if I were going to run my business again and say, hey, I want to sell into a private equity fund because I like what they're doing, and the chance to be, work with those kinds of people would be really great for me, versus I think this business would be best fit into a family office, because that just seems like home. If I had known that when I took over the printing business and could have built in that direction, I think I would have saved a lot of frustration and confusion on my part. So kind of knowing where you're going before you start walking is it's always helpful. And if there are people out there that have profitable businesses and they're thinking of selling in the next 5 or whatever years, and I'm happy to have a 10-minute conversation with anybody and kind of point them in the direction that I think they should go, and kind of the key parts, and stay in touch with them with the hopes of working with them when they're ready to exit.
All right. So talking about, okay.
Yeah, I would have, if I would have run across somebody that would have helped me, it would have made a big impact, because just approaching it from the outside is it's very confusing, and there's so much misinformation out there in the business press. Not that it's not an exciting story to sell that I took my business, I earned my living, and I sold it. Like, nobody cares. If you can put a spin on it, and I sold it for 100 times revenue or 50 times earnings, and most ice cream shops don't sell for that. That all of a sudden is newsworthy, and it's true, but it's half the story, right? Why, did they buy your ice cream shop to tear it down because they wanted to build an apartment building on your land? You can say you did a real estate transaction, or you can say you sold your ice cream shop, and it's usually a much more interesting story to say you sold your ice cream shop for that much money. So that's kind of what goes on out there.
All right. So you talked about a blog post you wrote earlier. You also talked about having a 10-minute call. So if listeners want to reach out to you, or they want to work with you, or they want to learn more from you, read your blog post and everything, how can they do that?
So everything I have is on my website. It's davidjacobsbusinessbroker.com. My email is david@davidjacobsbusinessbroker.com. It's really just me. I'm with a firm right now. I'm with a firm called Zoom, based in Irvine, and we each do our own marketing. So yeah, if they can visit my website, davidjacobsbusinessbroker.com. All my blog posts are there. Past deals are there. My approach is there. The types of clients I work with are there. If I'm not the right guy for you, I'll tell you. If you have a business that seems to be a saleable business, but it's not in an industry that I know anything about, I'm with a larger firm, and we have lots of guys. I'm one of the youngest guys there. So guys have been doing this for 20 and 30 years. I'm happy to make the referral and introduce you to somebody that can help you sell your business. I work with buyers and sellers all over the country. So yeah, the website is a great place to get started, or just send me an email. I'm happy to set up a call and we can have a quick conversation and see what's going on.
Nice. All right. So as we come to the end, are there any last words you'd like to share with the listeners?
It's stressful to sell your business, but it should be a really fun process. It's very fun to start meeting the buyers, and you have this preconceived notion of who you're going to sell your business to and what the deal is going to look like based upon what you've read about and heard from your friends. It's not necessarily going to be like that. And I think with the right mindset, and the curiosity of getting to know people and understanding their approach and hearing about people's past success, it can be a lot of fun and a great finale on a successful career. So I think approaching the process with the right attitude, and nothing's going to happen. It's not my business to sell. I won't be making any decisions for my clients. It's their business. They will sign the papers and they will get the money in their bank account. But just meeting the buyers and hearing what they have to say and getting to know people and thinking about who am I talking to and where will they take my business and are they the right person, I think could be a fun journey.
All right. So thank you very much, David, for coming on the Tech Your Business podcast today.
Thank you for having me. It was great to have a conversation with you and get to understand your listeners a little bit more.
Yeah. And for the listeners, thank you for listening up to this point. So you've heard it all. If you have a business you probably want to exit, don't just shut it down. Figure out how to make it sellable and then sell it. And you've heard, I'm sure some of you have gone through the process of try to go through the process. So you know that at the end of the day, business broker is needed to make it faster and simpler for you. So thank you all for being with us up to this point on this episode of the Tech Your Business show. And till next week, when we come back with another episode, don't forget to keep taking your business. Bye for now.